Welcome to Debt Matters, the UK discussion, where we analyze the news shaping credit control, collections, and recoveries.
Hello.
We're focusing today on a tactical development from the Financial Conduct Authority.
Mm-hmm.
It's a move that I think demands some real attention from, well, every compliance officer and operational leader in the lending space.
Indeed. We're looking at what is really a foundational shift in how the FCA manages its oversight.
A shift. How so?
Well, they've been strategically and very deliberately reducing their caseload, clearing out a regulatory backlog that's, built up over years.
Right.
And that action, it changes the landscape. It really resets the standards for what regulatory risk even means for firms that are managing debt.
Absolutely. The FCA isn't just, tidying their desk here. They're redesigning their entire enforcement strategy. So for you, the listener, this means the rules of engagement have changed. If the regulator is now focusing its limited resources on fewer targets,
Then those targets become much higher value, much higher risk. And our mission today is to get past the headlines. We're going to unpack what this pivot, fewer investigations, handled much, much faster means for the day-to-day work of debt management.
from the very first letter to a customer, right?
Right. From arrears communication all the way through to vulnerability documentation. This is all about adjusting your internal governance dials to meet a, frankly, heightened level of regulatory expectation.
Okay, so let's get into this. Let's unpack this repositioning. The core action is, well, it's quite stark when you look at it. The FCA has been on this focused campaign since about April 2023. And it's resulted in them closing 100 investigations without taking any formal enforcement action.
100.
100. And the immediate outcome of that is their active caseload is now the lowest it has been in almost 10 years.
Which is a huge drop.
It is. And that reduction is a clear signal of an internal mandate for efficiency and focus. This isn't just, bureaucracy cleaning itself up.
Yeah. It's a calculated decision to shift away from those broad exploratory inquiries that, well, often yield weak evidence or limited consumer redress.
So they're cutting the fat, essentially.
They are. The FCA is now concentrating its resources, its legal teams, its investigators, exclusively on cases where the evidence is robust, where they can set a strong market precedent.
And where the impact is biggest.
Exactly. Where the impact on consumer outcomes, and therefore the deterrent effect, is maximized.
It's definitely a quality over quantity approach. And for a regulator this size, that recalibration is a massive undertaking. We've got some numbers that really illustrate the scale of this change for you.
The numbers are quite telling.
Let's start with the overall volume.
Yeah.
The total number of open cases has dropped dramatically. It's fallen from 230 back in 2022 to just 124 by October 2025.
That's almost halving the live investigative workload.
Practically in half.
And this is where, we need to challenge that immediate assumption. You might think, okay, they're closing cases, so does that mean less regulatory risk?
But probably not.
Probably not. What's compelling here is that the reduction in open cases is coupled with a sharp reduction in new investigations being opened.
Right.
In the year leading up to March 2025, they only started 23 new investigations. That suggests a really intensive internal vetting process is now in place.
So they're not just sweeping old files off the desk.
No, they're being highly selective about what even enters the formal pipeline in the first place.
They're pre-vetting for winnability. That's what it sounds like.
It is.
And if we look specifically at enforcement operations, so these are the investigations at the highest level of regulatory gravity. The number of those dropped from 188 in March 2024 to 130 by March 2025.
So it's not just the minor probes getting cut.
No, it's across the board.
Yeah.
They're specifically reducing the most serious backlogs.
Which immediately raises a question, doesn't it? Was all that regulatory time and, frankly, industry resource wasted on these 100 closed cases?
You have to assume so.
The answer is likely yes, and that's precisely why the strategic reset is happening. The FCA is signaling that they recognize the cost to themselves and to the firms they investigate of these prolonged resource-draining inquiries that just fade away.
And they want to avoid repeating that pattern.
They do.
So if they're only keeping the files they think they can win, how telling is the conviction rate for the ones they do pursue?
It's extremely telling. If you look at the period between April and November 2025, the FCA resolved 24 cases.
Okay.
Out of those 24, 15 resulted in formal enforcement action.
15 out of 24.
That's a resolution rate where enforcement followed in, 62.5% of concluded cases?
62.5%. That's a high strike rate.
It is.
And when you contrast that with the 100 cases closed without action, It just paints a very clear picture.
It does. They are aggressively culling the files where the evidence was maybe a bit circumstantial, the legal path was uncertain, or the case just didn't have that market-wide impact they're looking for now.
Right.
They're explicitly favoring cases they expect to win. Cases that provide clear deterrent value and cases where they can achieve rapid consumer redress.
So that forces firms to raise their game.
It forces firms to raise their internal evidence and conduct standards immediately. They're communicating to the industry. If we choose to open a file on you now, we are coming with strong evidence, and we intend to follow through and to do it rapidly.
So the days of relying on regulatory fatigue or hoping an inquiry gets lost in the backlog,
Those days are over.
this means the risk profile changes entirely. It's no longer about managing a diffuse long-term regulatory exposure.
No.
It's about preparing for acute, high-stakes exposure if you get your core conduct rules wrong.
The reallocation of resources is the key. The manpower saved by closing those 100 cases isn't going into retirement.
No, it's being redirected.
It's being redirected to rapidly build the strongest possible evidence packages for the remaining high-priority issues.
So for collections firms, what does that mean in practice?
It means the quality of your internal file notes, your audit trails, your systems governance, it's all now under a much more intense spotlight. You have to operate knowing the regulator will only engage when their foundation is solid and their intent is clear.
So the message isn't relaxation at all. The message is refinement and rigor.
Precisely. If you are still operating with a governance model that was designed to withstand slow, drawn-out inquiries, you are significantly exposed to this new velocity of enforcement. They're looking for clear, systematic failings now, not just isolated instances of human error.
Okay, let's pivot then. Let's talk about the practical effect this has on the day-to-day operations of debt management. You called it the upstream effect.
Yes. When a regulator so clearly signals its focus is on serious, winnable misconduct cases, it demands an immediate change in behavior across the market.
A change driven by self-preservation, I'd imagine.
Entirely. Firms react by dramatically tightening their controls, specifically where that regulatory risk is most visible and most easily provable.
Which means the customer interaction points.
Exactly. Your operational focus shifts to the effectiveness of initial affordability assessments, the consistent handling of vulnerable customers, the speed and fairness of your complaints process, and crucially, the provision of genuine, sustainable forbearance options.
And collections is the flashpoint for all of this, isn't it?
It is. It's the point of maximum friction. It's the moment where a firm's policies become a tangible customer experience.
And that dictates what's acceptable pressure and what crosses the line into customer harm.
The very kind of clear harm this streamlined FCA team wants to prosecute.
So this changes the risk tolerance inside a firm.
Completely. Historically, some firms might have, let's say, flirted with more aggressive or ambiguous collection practices. They could gamble that the sheer weight of the FCA's caseload meant their marginal case wouldn't be pursued to the end.
But that gamble is off the table now.
That calculus has evaporated. With the FCA only taking forward the cleaner, clearer examples of misconduct, the tolerance for any ambiguity within firms, well, it should plummet to zero.
So firms now have to proactively define that boundary between recovery and unfair treatment. And they have to place that boundary much further back than they did before.
And this is all about conduct risk. It's a key concept here.
Okay, define that for us.
Well, procedural compliance risk is about ticking boxes, right? Did the agent read the right script? But conduct risk is outcome-focused. Did the customer achieve a fair outcome, regardless of the script?
And the FCA is laser-focused on conduct.
Laser-focused. A firm can have a perfect policy on paper, but if the audit trail shows agents routinely failing to apply it to get fair outcomes, like consistently failing to identify clear signs of mental health vulnerability, then that firm is exposed.
And the FCA is being really explicit about prioritizing those consumer outcomes. They want quicker redress, fewer inquiries that end with no action.
Yes, and that prioritization of redress means the velocity of resolution becomes paramount for firms.
Give us a practical example of that.
Okay. Say a lender finds a systemic flaw, maybe a faulty data input causing incorrect interest calculations on arrears. The expectation is no longer just fix the system going forward.
You have to look back.
Immediately, you have to start a retrospective review, identify all the affected customers, calculate fair compensation, and execute that redress rapidly. The FCA's new, quicker enforcement timeline directly demands a quicker remediation cycle from the industry.
Which could be a huge operational challenge. Some of these legacy IT systems. Tracing historical harm can take months.
Or years sometimes. It creates a budgetary pressure point. Firms have to invest in tech that allows for that rapid data analysis. And this focus also means heavier end-to-end monitoring of the whole customer journey.
You mean every single touch point?
Every single one. The design of your arrears letters, the automated logic in your text reminders, how vulnerability is identified, the clarity of escalation routes into hardship teams, all of it.
So it's a shift from just passively documenting compliance to actively demonstrating fairness.
That's the crux of it. Your systems have to be robust enough not just to log interactions, but to track personalized treatments and prove consistency across similar groups of customers.
Right, so if you offer a 6-month payment break to one customer,
And a 3-month break to another with identical circumstances, you must have an auditable, justifiable reason rooted in that customer's specific needs.
or you're exposed.
You're exposed. Consistency and justification become the bedrock of your regulatory defense.
And this higher bar, it applies to everyone in the chain, right? Lenders, third-party servicers, collections agencies.
Got everyone. If you are touching debt, you have to operate under the assumption that if a case reaches the FCA, it will be pursued with high intent and high velocity. They're hunting for those clear, systematic failings now.
Okay, so this brings us to the operational reality. The FCA is focusing its resources. So where does the risk actually crystallize for firms right now? It's not an all-clear signal, is it?
No, it's a very focused warning. The risk shifts entirely into operational ambiguity, what we've been calling the gray zones.
And what are they?
These are the areas where regulatory principle meets the messy reality of daily customer interactions. The two most critical gray zones are, first, inconsistency in treating customers with similar situations, and second, weak identification and support for customer vulnerability.
Inconsistency is regulatory kryptonite, isn't it?
It is. If your policies allow agents to exercise broad discretion without documenting the rationale, or if similar customers can get vastly different forbearance offers, you are creating the perfect scenario for a systematic failure investigation.
Because the FCA judges fairness through the lens of consistency.
They do. If you can't demonstrate a rational, justifiable reason for treating people differently, the default assumption is unfairness. And now, by focusing their resources, the FCA can dedicate time to sophisticated data analytics to spot these patterns across thousands of files.
Analysis they couldn't do before when they were spread so thin.
Exactly. They're looking for patterns that point to systemic governance failure, not just one-off human mistakes.
And on that note, this shift to fewer faster means the evidentiary bar is higher for the firms themselves. What does that demand in terms of documentation and speed?
Documentation has to evolve from just a compliance task to a defensive strategy. You have to expect a higher bar for evidence.
So what does that look like?
It means file notes have to capture the context of decisions, not just a log of transactions. An audit trail must show not just what decision was made, like agreed to 3-month payment break, but why that specific decision was deemed suitable for that customer, given their documented circumstances.
That elevates the file note from a simple record to a potential regulatory defense document. It needs rigorous training for every agent.
Exactly. And secondly, the pressure on operational speed is immense. If the FCA is promising to resolve things quicker, firms have to compress their own remediation cycles. A slow response to an identified flaw is now, in itself, a form of conduct risk.
Because it allows customer harm to continue.
Precisely. Policy fixes, agent retraining, it has to happen in weeks, not quarters.
Okay, so let's translate all of this into an actionable 5-point checklist for creditors and collections teams listening.
Let's do it.
First point. Review arrears communications for tone, clarity, and ensuring support options, not just demands, are evident.
This is fundamental.
Yeah.
Your communication library is the easiest piece of evidence for the regulator to gather, and the review has to be twofold. Legal compliance, yes, but also a conduct risk assessment.
So it's about the psychological impact.
It is. Is the tone supportive? Or is it coercive, designed to scare a payment out of someone?
And where you place the support options matters.
It matters hugely. Are pathways for help like signposting to citizens' advice or step change, are they prominent at the start of the letter? Or are they buried in the fine print after 3 paragraphs of legal threats? Under consumer duty, putting support options at the top isn't a suggestion, it's a necessary mitigation of conduct risk.
And you need that consistency across different channels too. Letters, emails, SMS.
That's where it gets complex. If your letter is supportive, but your SMS is just a threatening payment link with no immediate access to help, that inconsistency could be seen as manipulative. The whole digital journey has to maintain the same supportive tone.
Right. Okay, point two, retest the affordability and expenditure assumptions used when setting up repayment plans.
This is a deep dive into your decisioning engine. When you set a repayment plan, you use assumptions about income and expenditure. You have to aggressively retest those assumptions. Are your benchmarks for basic living costs current and realistic for today's economy?
So it's not enough that the payment fits mathematically. You have to prove it doesn't compromise their living standards.
Precisely. The core concept is sustainability. The plan has to be genuinely sustainable long-term, not just structured to maximize your recovery speed short-term. The best way to audit this is to analyze failed plans.
So if a plan defaults after one or two payments,
Then you have to ask if the initial assessment was fundamentally flawed or overly aggressive. A high failure rate in early payments is direct, measurable evidence of a flawed process. It's a critical enforcement risk point.
okay. Point three, strengthen vulnerability pathways. So improve identification, documentation, adjustments, and outcomes.
This is still the single highest conduct risk area. Strengthening these pathways means action on training, tech, and governance. Training has to move beyond tick boxes. Agents need to be trained in active listening, recognizing behavior cues, handling difficult conversations.
So moving from passive screening to active engagement.
Yes, and the documentation has to be your defense. Once vulnerability is identified, the specific needs and the operational adjustments you made must be meticulously recorded.
So if a customer has mobility issues, did you move communication to email? If they have a mental health condition, did you change the collection strategy to avoid high-pressure calls?
Exactly. The accountability lies in proving that you didn't just note the vulnerability, but that you systematically altered the collection strategy to mitigate harm, and that the adjustment actually led to a better outcome. Your systems have to enforce that adjusted strategy for every single subsequent interaction.
Okay, that's clear. Point four, tighten quality assurance, or QA. Shifting the focus from compliance scripts to conduct risk.
This is a fundamental overhaul for most QA departments. Traditional QA checks for adherence to scripts. Did the agent read the warning? Did they follow the steps?
That's procedural compliance?
Right. Conduct risk QA focuses entirely on the quality and fairness of the interaction, even if the script was followed perfectly.
So you're analyzing the agent's tone, empathy, probing skills, the appropriateness of the solution offered.
Precisely. And you're sampling calls based on risk, not randomly. You should be prioritizing interactions with potentially vulnerable customers, conversations where affordability was disputed, or calls that led to a complaint.
So you're using a risk-based sampling methodology.
You have to. You're trying to assess fairness in the context of the whole conversation. A firm could be 100% compliant with procedure, but still exhibit poor conduct if agents are pushing non-sustainable solutions or failing to spot clear distress signals.
So the QA function becomes more like a frontline conduct risk sensor.
That's a great way to put it. It needs to interpret intent and customer outcome, not just procedural adherence.
Got it. Okay, final point, number five. Ensure learnings from complaints feed back into process changes rapidly, within weeks, not quarters.
The complaints process has to be seen as a critical intelligence function for identifying regulatory risk, not just a customer resolution tool. If the FCA is moving faster, firms have to move faster to fix things based on systemic complaints.
So if a pattern emerges, say 3 similar complaints in a week about unclear fees, you can't wait for the quarterly governance meeting.
Waiting like that demonstrates a critical lack of governance. It shows an indifference to ongoing customer harm, which is exactly the kind of clear systemic failure the streamlined FCA team is looking for.
The expectation is immediacy.
It is. Launch a rapid root cause analysis, identify the flaw, and implement a fix and retrospective redress within weeks.
So the ability to aggregate, analyze, and act on complaints data is now a core requirement.
It is. If you can prove you spotted a pattern of harm and fixed it in 10 working days, that's a strong defense. If you waited 2 months, you are exposed.
Right. This shift by the regulator is demanding a proportional increase in speed and rigor from the firms they oversee.
It's all about demonstrability, proving you are making a continuous effort to minimize harm.
Okay, let's wrap this up.
To reiterate the core message, the FCA is executing a calculated streamlining of its enforcement efforts. By culling 100 probes, they are signaling a higher conviction rate, demanding sharper expectations on conduct, and, critically, establishing a pathway for much faster consequences when standards are missed.
And for the debt collection sector specifically, the message is clear. The winners in this new regime will be the teams that invest in the systems and training to definitively prove fair treatment. It means demonstrating consistent decision-making and maintaining solid, context-rich documentation at every single step of the customer journey. Proving good conduct has become an existential requirement.
And here's a final thought for you to carry forward. Consider how demonstrating seamless consistency across different communication channels. So, the empathy of a voice call versus the rigid logic of an automated digital message will become the most challenging but crucial aspect of proving fair treatment.
So how do you guarantee an algorithm can deliver the same supportive tone as your best trained agent?
Exactly. That operational gap between the human and the algorithm, that is where the next era of conduct risk is waiting.